when Blockberry Creative suddenly announced on November 25th, 2022 that they're kicking out Chuu from their popular group LOONA, this sent shockwaves among the K-pop world. LOONA is currently on their 6th year, having debuted back in October 2016, and they've carved out quite a niche within the K-pop industry, actually having a lot more international fans than Korean ones. And Chuu is quite popular among international K-pop fans. So with all that being said, why would Blockberry Creative kick out one of its most popular, most marketable stars? It makes no sense. And that's a good question, and one that we're going to answer pretty soon. But before we do that, here's what to expect from this video. Rather than just talk about the drama and spill the tea, as many of the kids say these days, we're going to delve in deep and talk about both the K-pop idols experience as well as the company's experience, and what they're both thinking from a business as well as brand marketing perspective.
And most importantly, how the Chuu case will most likely change the K-pop industry. Because as you'll see in this video, Chuu's expulsion from LOONA opened up a lot of people's eyes in the evils of the K-pop industry and what some labels do to their idols. And perhaps this video may open yours as well.
So with that being said, let's talk about the big dispute that happened between Chuu and Blockberry Creative.
When the initial dispute first came out, both sides pointed fingers at one another, with the public not knowing much. Blockberry Creative, shortened to BBC, started it off by claiming that Chuu was expelled for abusing her power and was unbearable to work with. The label portrayed Chuu as being this ego-driven diva that's disrupting the group, as well as being unprofessional. So according to BBC, it left them no choice but to lay down the law and get rid of the disruption. Then we have Chuu's side, with her saying that she never shamed any of her fans and went against BBC's claims, saying that they're pretty much lying. She claimed that she hasn't been paid for the numerous ads, appearances on TV shows, and her career with LOONA. She would continue saying that there was unfair profit splits, although at this time, the profit splits weren't really discussed. Called out her label by saying that they're a horrible company and not doing the most basic thing that any company should do, paying their employees. At this point, the general public did not know too much, other than Blockberry Creative being very shady in the past and having a pretty bad reputation, whereas Chuu looked very good from this first round thus far. But other than that, not much else was known about the case, until round 2. Round 2 would start just a week and a half later. On December 19th, 2022, the situation would explode when Korean tabloid and media outlet Dispatch released some inside details to what truly happened between Chuu and Blockberry Creative. To understand how this relationship eroded between star singer and label, let's go back to their pre-debut days. Back in December 2017, things were a lot better between Chuu and BBC, with them exchanging Happy New Year's messages and the BBC directors promising a happy and positive environment. Fast forward 5 years later to the end of 2021, and the niceties turned into aggression. What happened in the span of 5 years when the once harmonious relationship between singer and label became venomous? It really came down to BBC going into debt, unfair profit splitting, and Chuu and her mom standing up for themselves. Creating LOONA was an ambitious project, as Blockberry Creative is a small company debuting 12 girls. Yet despite them being from a small company, the costs were staggering. For 2 years during their pre-debut, from 2016 to 2018, each girl would be introduced and have their own accompanying single and MV, where many of those MVs were shot overseas in several countries. Add in this elaborate backstory from former creative director Jaden Jong, some subgroups, and the expenses to debut LOONA were rising even further, with reports saying Blockberry Creative spent around $3.37 million in 1 year during their pre-debut in 2017. And about $9 million by the time the group was officially going to debut in 2018. To put these staggering debut costs more into perspective, JYP's Twice, who debuted back in 2015, a year earlier than LOONA's pre-debut, cost around 5 million won, or roughly 429,000 USD, which was a huge bargain for the 9-member group. Twice recouped their debut costs in just 45 days, as the total sales and the numerous CF deals secured for the Twice members turned JYP's revenue line from red to black fast. Unlike JYP's Twice, LOONA did not enjoy the huge brand power, resources, and financial backing that Twice had. BBC has admitted that LOONA's endless costs were not easy for a small to mid-sized company, the agency, to upfront these costs, which in turn would be upfronted to the LOONA members to pay off these expenses. It is estimated that in 5 years, BBC spent over 17 billion won, or about $13 million USD, 24 albums and 44 music videos over that span. Amidst the rising costs over the years, high expectations were placed on Chuu, where she was expected to be the breadwinner and carry the company on her back. Her star power, BBC hoped, would propel the group into selling a lot of albums. And to do this, LOONA would have to depend on overseas sales, since they were a lot more popular internationally. By 2021, Chuu's frustrations boiled over, as the profit splits put both her and her bandmates in constant debt. Back on December 2017, Chuu herself signed an exclusive contract with BBC, where the profit split would be 70-30, 70% being BBC and 30% being Chuu, and they would split any expenses 50% down the line. This was very advantageous to the company. Let's break down this example in greater detail to show how bad these percentages are for Chuu and how it only benefits BBC. So let's say that the total costs or expenses are about $100,000 and that the revenue is also $100,000. And when you take revenue minus costs, the total will be zero. It looks like both BBC and LOONA broke even with no profit. Yet, when the percentages come into play, BBC will actually make money. Using the revenue number, $100,000, BBC's 70% split in revenue totals, or 70K, and using the cost number, also 100K, and then BBC's 50% split, which totals 50K, and then taking these two numbers, BBC's revenue minus cost will equal 20K. Then we go to Chuu's total, where the only number that changes is the revenue percentage, which is 30%. So going through the same math calculations we did earlier with BBC, Chuu actually loses 20K. Well, that's not fair for Chuu. So how could Chuu make money? The label's revenue has to be higher, a lot higher. At the very minimum, they would have to hit 200K or higher in revenue, which if we plug in the numbers, BBC makes out with $90,000 in profit, and Chuu barely making money, now at 10K. Now let's put some real numbers to show just how bad LOONA's contracts are. Between 2016 and 2022, BBC made 18.2 billion won in revenue and 16.9 billion won in expenses. Then LOONA's strange cut from all that is 5.4 billion won, while their 50% expense split of 16.9 billion won is 8.45 billion won. Taking 5.4 billion won from the group's profit and subtracting 8.45 billion won for expenses leaves the group in debt with about negative 3.05 billion won. Then split this 12 ways for all the LOONA members, or about 162,557 USD, showing clearly that Chuu is getting screwed over, as well as the other LOONA members, since they had similar contracts. And as you can imagine, as the revenue number gets higher, the gap between how much BBC makes and how much Chuu takes in becomes even larger. Adding onto the shadiness of all this, it's widely believed that the big three in HYBE do not go over 40% in profit splits with their singers. So for BBC, a small company, to tie LOONA to 70% profit splits, that makes it extremely difficult for members to make a decent wage, let alone break even. For the first 5 years, Blockberry Creative had all the power, as Chuu, as well as her other bandmates, had contracts that heavily favored the K-pop label. In turn, this would put immense pressure on the Chuu and her bandmates to sell a lot of albums just to break even or make a little bit of money, which would go back into paying back their debt. Blockberry Creative had all the cards and looked to pay their own debt through the girls. The girls and Chuu looked to be stuck in a never-ending cycle of debt. Until a power shift occurred and Chuu would pull out the reverse UNO card. Chuu filed for an injunction asking the courts to suspend her exclusive contract, citing that it's basically unfair. 2 months later, in March of 2022, the courts sided with her, where now the contract favored Chuu. For one, the big change would be the numbers itself, where now the revenue split became reverse, the 70-30% split for Chuu to BBC. Chuu knew that she was the breadwinner for Blockberry Creative and now held all the cards. Since she had this contract change, she actually took home 70 million won in January and about 220 million won in total, or about $178,813 USD, making it the first time that she would be making money instead of continuing to pile on debt. In addition, there were 5 other major points of the contract that were added in. 1. Chuu can be absent for up to 3 LOONA full group activities per month. 2. Chuu can also be absent for up to 3 LOONA album activities per month. 3. If a schedule that was not agreed upon in advance in points 1 and 2, then Chuu's schedule would take precedence. If an emergency happens where the label had to reschedule or just needed Chuu, they can do so only once. And 5. This is the poison pill in the contract, where if one party damages the other, that offending party has to pay 50 million won per incident, or about $38,000 USD, as well as the contract being null and void immediately. This fifth point would also be known as Article 5, Item 2. And this point is especially important as it would be the powder keg that exploded the big drama in 2022. When LOONA was shooting the MV for Flip That, there was an hour delay in the shooting for said MV. When that happened, Blockberry Creative asked for a 1-hour delay, asking Chuu's mom if her daughter can stay up to film up to the 19th scene of Flip That. Yet Chuu would stay hours longer, staying up until 3 AM to film the 16th scene of the MV, and didn't even get to film up to the 19th scene of the said music video. Yet Chuu's mom wouldn't have any of that. She cited Article 5, Item 2, which states, as mentioned earlier, that the offending party has to pay out 50 million won for basically wasting the other's time for not being on time. Since according to Chuu's mom, that 1-hour delay threw off Chuu's schedule since she was scheduled to film a commercial the next day. After this response, there was an impromptu chat meeting between the CEO and staff members, saying that Jiu, Chuu's real name, is just suddenly going to leave the set because of that 1-hour delay, despite the choreography involving all 12 members. So now, the group is down to 11 members doing the music video. Seen here are further messages from BBC trying to salvage the situation and hope that Chuu can wait to film the MV. Yet again, Chuu's mom insisted that if her daughter stayed for the shooting, she wants that 50 million won, foreboding to a split between Chuu and BBC in the near future. While this profit split dispute raged, the everyday back and forth messages between its star singer and label went to new lows, with both parties now dropping any formalities. BBC claims that Chuu was being unprofessional and thus from their original claim, power tripping and swinging her weight, while Chuu said that BBC was doing gapjil, or power tripping, by using their immense power as a label to keep LOONA in debt, as well as keeping Chuu from talking back, seen as very unprofessional in both a Korean workplace and in Korean culture. Chuu's frustration boiled over, as these could be seen from the messages in late 2021, where the dispute really came down to 3 major points: profit splits, missed payments, and Chuu and Blockberry Creative both claiming unprofessionalism. One of BBC's employees asked if Chuu wasn't going to participate in LOONA's album promotions, alluding to Chuu skipping schedules in the past. Chuu, in turn, called employee B a liar and said that she never skipped the schedule. There were also messages exchanged where Chuu accused the company of ignoring her mom when she asked for a seal. And you might be asking, what is a seal? In Korea, important documents such as financial transactions are signed using a stamp or seal to show it's legit. Chuu continues to say that, basically, not only do they not give me my seal, but they withhold my money, sarcastically saying, Blockberry is the best. BBC, in turn, says they never ignored Chuu's mom. Add to the fact where reports said that BBC was in severe debt in 2021, and this added to Chuu's immense anger. As by the end of 2021, various media started reporting on BBC's debt. Among the debt, employees and stylists weren't being paid for months. There was speculation that the unpaid wages would take some time to be paid back. It's gotten so bad that Orbitz, the fan name of LOONA fans, wanted to save the group. And where the strangest twist in the story comes into play, Orbitz reached out to Elon Musk in 2021, well before he was known for buying out Twitter and the ensuing drama from that buyout, and where back then he was known solely for Tesla and SpaceX. From a 2018 tweet, it looked like Elon knew about the group and could possibly be a fan of LOONA, or at the very least, have seen one of their music videos before. After Chuu's contract was upruled by the courts in 2022 and became more favorable towards her, she began to set strict boundaries and talk a lot more. Other big disputes such as Chuu and BBC at major odds during the Flipback music video of 2022, Chuu also refused to go on shows like Queendom 2, a reality show that LOONA participated earlier that year. BBC also claimed that Chuu spoiled a 5-second spoiler of the point choreography of Flip That, and that would be this part. With BBC basically saying it's a spoiler before the music video came out, Chuu retorts saying that they will pick up all the pieces when she writes about everything that went on, then die. This basically alludes to things that BBC is doing so many bad things behind the scenes until Chuu is pushed to the limit and actually exposes them and writes everything down, that no one on BBC is going to take her seriously, and 2, that spoiling a very short choreo is minor compared to all the crap that BBC has done. Chuu continued with this long message chain where she just went off on a person named Team Lead B, saying that the CEO is tough to work with, and that for her message to be sent to the CEO word for word. Dispatch talked to Chuu to clarify the heated back and forth messages, where Dispatch said that BBC claimed Chuu was doing power abuse due to the language used. Chuu in turn said that she wasn't angry at Team Lead B, but deeply frustrated by how the company operated, as well as being frustrated at a Director D, where this Director D was telling Chuu not to rewrite the contract or change it, saying it's even with a 50-50 split with Chuu Can Do It, or the Korean translation, Chuu Protects the Earth, a show about spreading awareness of global warming. Then Director D mocks Chuu about her math level and finishing grade school, which is quite rude. Chuu understandably said, "Are you gonna talk to me like that?" When Director D said, "I'm just joking," Chuu saw through that BS, saying, "We're not on joking terms." Which is also weird because why would you joke on such a serious topic? Lastly, Chuu tells Dispatch that Director D basically mocked her and treated her like a child, that there was so much distrust even before that conversation, and that she would have to be blunt just for them to listen. So Chuu does admit that she spoke harshly, but as she would say, she was only human and she made a mistake. Wage theft, unfair splitting, the girls being in perpetual debt, Blockberry Creative is in serious trouble as the company could possibly face bankruptcy if they're ordered to pay back the LOONA members. LOONA could also possibly get out of their contract, and sponsors would probably back out in working with BBC. Now this brings us to the present, where Chuu was expelled from LOONA. On January 14, 2023, 4 members won their lawsuits against BBC: Heejin, Kim Lip, Jin Sol, and Chweri. They had their contracts suspended, while 5 other members lost: Hasul, Yojin, Ibs, Olivia He, and Go Won. The courts did not find their contracts unfair. 2 other members at first, Hyunjin and Vivi, did not file any lawsuits, until that is, February 2nd, 2023, when they too started to make moves to leave BBC. And of course, with Chuu already leaving the group. At the time of this video, the lawsuit is still going on, with 11 members still part of BBC. But if all the contracts are successfully terminated and the members could leave the label, BBC would lose LOONA. Throughout the lawsuits, the members would thank the Orbits via social media, saying it's very difficult to go through a lawsuit to sue their label. Let's delve into the lessons we can learn from this Chuu and LOONA versus BBC case. When Chuu started to go off on her managers and the CEO, Orbits and the general public cheered her on. And good for her, she stood up for herself despite going against the label. But there's a reason why few idols ever speak out about their label and handle it in court, with a private settlement, or just take the abuse. For one, in Korea, talking back is considered unprofessional, where companies want their idols to fall in line and obey. If idols talk back against their managers and CEOs, those higher-ups can end an idol's career right away by kicking them out from the group and slandering them through the news. So most idols put their heads down and refuse to stand up to their bosses, even if their bosses are 100% in the wrong. Going onto social media and talking bad about your boss in Korea publicly is also considered taboo. Calling out companies often considered defamation. Libel laws are a serious crime in the country as they protect companies from nearly all criticism. And yes, even the bad companies. So if an idol ever speaks out about the abuses a company's doing, they better be 100% right with a ton of evidence, testimonies, and other receipts. Fortunately, Chuu had just that, as we'll talk about some examples soon. Chuu's case also sets a precedent in the K-pop industry, where standing up for yourself may become more common in the future, where the power is starting to swing towards the K-pop idols and combating horrible practices and abuse in the industry. After all, if a notable idol like Chuu can stand up for herself, then other idols may follow, as she won a court case for a profit split in 2022 and has public opinion on her side. And speaking of everyone liking her,
Right now, public opinion of Chuu is quite high, with LOONA fans fiercely backing her up. For instance, take online sources such as Twitter, Reddit, YouTube, and even newspapers. There's rarely a bad thing said about Chuu, with a few critics saying that Chuu could have been more professional or had a more formal tone when talking to BBC. But even with that critique of Chuu, the vast majority of people are supporting her. And people are pretty much just Team Chuu.
Saying, among other things, that there were no reports of Chuu ever berating staff or her being hard to work with. Throngs of fans have Chuu's back, saying that BBC is the villain in this drama. In fact, from Chuu's birthday party fan event in 2022, she may have predicted that BBC would suddenly kick her out from the group, with Chuu saying that there's something towards the end of the year that may shock and surprise people, and that it's out of her control, being quite vague in her wording. When her fans were cheering her on, Chuu said that she didn't want her birthday party just to announce this. Of course, what happened after that birthday fan event was her eventual expulsion from LOONA and the ensuing drama between her and Blockberry Creative.
While having a strong public opinion is a great feeling, as Chuu is experiencing, a more important factor if a singer is truthful or a good person off the stage is what the professionals think of her, the people that she's worked with, the people that work within the K-pop industry. Testimonies from people that know her, have worked with her, such as her bandmates, as well as other staff members, and even public people that she interacts with, such as restaurant workers or hotel staff. These are all legitimate sources that are very important and show if Chuu is a good person. Pretty much by all accounts, it looks like she is indeed a good one.
Fortunately, Chuu has a ton of people backing her up. One of the biggest indicators is that the other LOONA members not only backed up Chuu, but as mentioned earlier, the other members were also trying to get out of BBC via filing a lawsuit for unfair contracts. Another huge telling factor is that there's been a ton of staffers defending Chuu. And this is big because people came out to defend Chuu before Dispatch's expose, where details were shown to the public, and how Chuu comes out looking extremely good from all of this. For instance, her YouTube screenwriter said that the allegations that Chuu is misusing her power are ridiculous. Staff members working for advertisement companies and TV shows fiercely defended Chuu, saying that they were so surprised by the news of Chuu being expelled, as Chuu always asked if the staff members were okay and gave us snacks to cheer us up during a shoot for a jelly advertisement. A webtoon artist, Won-dung, who also worked with Chuu, backed her up, saying that's not the kind of person who would do that at all on their Instagram. And a more detailed post by Won-dung that was translated by Little John on Twitter said that Jiu or Chuu was polite and often took photos with fans, and that the real ones, the ones that actually worked with Chuu, know the truth. LOONA's photographer, Far-young Kim, the group's producer, Choi Jae-yol, the journalist Joy Park, 4 Chuu Can Do It writers, video and photography staff, and a slew of other anonymous staff all came out to defend Chuu. But it wasn't just people defending Chuu, there were critics that turned back and shot at BBC, and Habagug, CEO of Young Gifted and Whack. And lastly, her own bandmate, Hyunjin, also backed up her former bandmate by saying her head hurts, she's heartbroken and angry, while acknowledging that the most heartbroken one right now is Chuu. Korean TV channel JTBC slammed the BBC as they went in with the title shamelessly selling to the fans, Blockberry Lie of the Month, where they called out BBC's previous quote of 9 of their members having lawsuits as baseless and untrue. Well, this turned out to be a complete lie, as it was actually true. The JTBC report said that BBC hid the lawsuits since the label were afraid that this could affect album sales, MV views, and money. The report also said that the label was trying to mislead clueless LOONA fans into continuing to support the girls and buy merch. Yet when the lawsuits were found to be true, BBC's worst nightmare came to fruition, as their January 2023 album was suspended, while boycotts took place around the world. And we'll talk about this a bit later. The slew of positive supportive comments defending Chuu is quite powerful, where you have over 50 people working from different areas in the K-pop industry, as well as service industry, all vouching for Chuu. That's impossible to ignore. After all, if Chuu were lying and BBC was right, wouldn't you think that people would jump on an opportunity to slander her, since Chuu is the hot topic right now? Or wouldn't you have BBC supporters defending the label? These are good questions to ponder. Furthermore, since there's no one defending or backing up BBC at all, this shows that BBC has egg on their face, and showed that even before the Dispatch expose, it showed that people believed that whatever Chuu is fighting for, there has to be a solid reason for it. And solid reason there is.
Now, when Dispatch first published their article on the Chuu versus BBC feud, they said that there was no true villain and that no one could be faulted on either side, that the case was a lot more complicated, had a lot of incompetence, and that both sides distrusted one another. And while the latter is very true, that both sides definitely did not trust one another, I do think that the headline is quite false and quite misleading. I do have a problem with Dispatch's headline of the "No True Villains," because looking at the evidence and testimonies thus far, I do think that Chuu is on the right side of things and that BBC is pretty scummy. And unless more evidence comes out to change those facts, it really doesn't look good for Blockberry Creative. I personally think that Dispatch is trying to stroke the flames by saying that both sides are equally guilty. By trying to balance both sides as being guilty, then they get more views and clicks.
After seeing the evidence, it appears even more that BBC is very much the villain while Chuu and her mom are lashing out and standing up for themselves. As mentioned earlier, the one thing that you can say about Chuu is that she was quite aggressive and unprofessional with her tone towards her managers and CEO, and that's the most you can say given her frustrations. With BBC, however, they look just horrible from Dispatch's own records. Wage theft, putting the girls in deliberate debt, and framing it like it's all Chuu's fault. While their expose did shed a lot of light on the ongoing controversy between Chuu and BBC, for people that's followed K-pop for a while, Dispatch isn't the most trustworthy. Because for every piece that Dispatch puts out that has credible evidence, they usually have a motive to stroke unneeded drama or add biased information. They've been known to slant their stories to be negative and controversy-filled to bring in more views. The Dispatch article also painted Chuu in a lot more unfavorable light. For people that can read Korean, there's more missing from this translation, as the translation is a literal one. The seriousness of the tone is missing, as Chuu's tone was quite out of character for her. Which is why I'm thinking BBC leaked the messages to Dispatch, as it made Chuu look a lot more rude without having any context of what was going on or how she was being screwed. And I think Chuu realized this as well when the Dispatch article came out and she saw her tone being looked at in a negative light, as she would apologize for her aggressive behavior towards her managers, saying, "I'm only human." Also, when Dispatch released figures of the Chuu and BBC profit breakdown, they actually hid how much BBC made, only showing how much Chuu made. As stated earlier, after her contract revision in early 2022, she made about 70 million won and about 220 million won in total. But these two columns, the ones that should have shown BBC's profit, was covered by these two cells on purpose, which is really dishonest and it tricks readers. So here's how much BBC actually made using the real numbers. This shows a huge disparity between how much BBC is raking in and how little Chuu is getting, which I think Dispatch and BBC were both trying to hide and tried to make BBC look better, rather than just present the profit numbers side by side. So unless further evidence or testimony comes out, Chuu and her mom are quite justified in lashing out for being abused. One of the smartest moves Chuu did during her time in LOONA is being professional while working with others, as you've seen earlier from all the testimonies and glowing words that people had to say about her. Now, this lesson of being professional isn't just confined to K-pop, as for all you working people out there working for corporate, these lessons will also hold true in your workplace. Now, the reasons of being professional are many. First, people like working with nice people. Now, it may be common sense to treat people nicely and, well, not be a douchebag towards others, even as a K-pop star. It's really not, as a lot of stars have huge egos, become too complacent, or think that once their performances are done, they can act like a diva and be horrible towards staff workers. And while many staff will put up with bad K-pop idol behavior, since it's either expected or they don't want to get that particular idol mad, since idols are usually put up on a pedestal and these staff members don't want to lose their jobs. With Chuu, as aforementioned earlier, it looked to be that everyone loved her. The public relates and likes a down-to-earth K-pop star, someone who treats people well behind the scenes, even when the cameras are off. Brands are willing to work with easy-to-work-with, low-maintenance idols, and idols that are easy to market, which usually means a personable, cute, and energetic idol, which Chuu definitely falls into. And while the Dispatch expose, as talked about earlier, shows Chuu being less than nice, to most people, she was sticking up for herself, and the label definitely deserved it. Sticking it to the evil CEO resonated with many in both Korea and overseas fans. Yet, Chuu didn't carry her anger towards anyone that she's worked with. So because of her professionalism, it's no surprise that she was defended by so many.
BBC is suffering more than just a tarnished reputation and a black eye within the K-pop industry, because they pretty much made the orbits very angry and are now boycotting LOONA's albums. And it's not because they're trying to hurt LOONA, of course not, but they're trying to hit the company behind the group, which in this case it's BBC. Fans are doing what they do best when you make them mad. They're voting with their wallets and purses, hoping that BBC gets hurt where it counts the most, losing money. Back in early December, Orbitz posted a long letter demanding that Blockberry Creative issue a statement showing what exactly happened between the company as well as Chuu and providing a detailed explanation to all the fans. BBC did not respond, and Orbitz, in retaliation, started boycotting the company. The fans would start their boycott on December 7th, when Dispatch later that month provided an expose between what happened to Chuu and BBC. Orbitz were even more determined to side with LOONA, believing that she's on the right side of K-pop history, and continued to push their boycott to limit or even stop international sales of LOONA albums.
Just how big is the boycott list? According to this tweet, there's a slew of overseas K-pop stores that won't be stocking LOONA's latest CD. The Orbit messaged these stores to notify them of the ongoing case. Since much of LOONA's fan base is based overseas, the boycott is already hurting the company's sales. From early reports, the first day of pre-orders for LOONA's January 2023 album of Zero is 62 copies, a far cry from the first day of pre-orders of Flip That, their group's last album, of 3,407 copies, which is a 98% decrease in pre-orders. LOONA fans boycotting shows that fans are wielding their power and know that the only way that K-pop labels will listen is to make them lose money. Unlike many other controversies where fandoms are split, Orbits seem to be united in this one, where even non-Orbits are cheering on Orbits and taking down BBC, and bringing justice for Chuu and calling out bad behavior from K-pop labels. Seeing the Orbits, especially international fans, being able to organize so well and do a coordinated boycott shows that fandoms have real power. BBC is learning this the hard way, as the old school way of K-pop labels wielding all of the power and fans just having to suck it up is long over. Because if you make a fandom so angry that it crosses the line, they'll make that K-pop label's life a living hell. And from the looks of it, Blockberry Creative crossed that line and then some. At the time of this video, Blockberry Creative announced that LOONA's January 2023 album will be postponed due to the recent drama and controversies surrounding the label, showing that the boycott already inflicted some serious damage on BBC's profits.
But it's not just the boycott that's killing BBC's bottom line. Perhaps the biggest reason why BBC finds itself in the situation it does is because it spent way too much during the 2-year pre-debut. They were very ambitious and thus went over their budget, many times fold. As aforementioned earlier, JYP's Twice back in 2015, when they debuted with a modest sum of $429,000 USD, which is much less than LOONA's pre-debut years. Unless you're part of the big three or HYBE, I don't think companies should be spending that much on a pre-debut or debut.
It's understandable that a label wants to make their K-pop group go out with a bang, but having MVs for each member, having subgroups, and a 2-year pre-debut would only hurt the group. It would have been better to debut the group as a much smaller scope at first to keep expenses down. And as more profit rolled in, then the label can spend things on extras, like having individual MVs for each member and subgroups. If they did all this over the course of several years, that would have been a lot more feasible and well within BBC's budget, as LOONA wouldn't have been stuck in horrible contract splits. In this case, even if LOONA and BBC didn't make enough money, fans would be a lot more understanding, as K-pop groups don't always succeed, and the LOONA members would have been cool. They wouldn't have been stuck in debt. Unfortunately, BBC gambled with this extravagant pre-debut and upfronted a load of debt, putting the expenses on the LOONA and backfiring in the end. After being kicked out from BBC, Chuu's popularity has skyrocketed even further, with her former label, Blockberry Creative, tanking even further. Orbits are continually supporting her. Overwhelming testimony from both Chuu and even some critics blasting BBC and her bandmates trying to get out of their label. This shows that Chuu not only looks extremely good from this debacle, but will have suitors asking her to join their entertainment label, with perhaps TV shows asking her to come on and tell her side of the story. Music shows will also line up wanting her to MC for that week, and new CF deals will want to sign her. In the end, BBC thought that expelling Chuu from LOONA without warning would bring the public to their side, but they were surprised when everyone went against them, as they burnt a lot of bridges and could lose their only K-pop group in the process. For Chuu, on the other hand, the opportunities are boundless, as she had new bridges open up for her. It's safe to say that I think she'll be busy in the near future with a slew of offers coming her way.
I think the Chuu case could end up changing the K-pop industry. Blockberry Creative has to be one of the most hated K-pop labels in K-pop history. And that's saying a lot because there's been some scummy K-pop companies throughout K-pop history. Because Chuu and her mom stood up to BBC, the damage to the label has been immense. As mentioned earlier, the rest of LOONA has to be livid for seeing the treatment on Chuu, as well as the mistreatment on the rest of the group. Many critics have came out to criticize BBC, and BBC's image is at an all-time low. And in fact, I would say that the damage has been so big, I don't know if Blockberry Creative could actually recover. On the other hand, Chuu shines from all of this. She looks really good from this controversy, and I'm sure there's going to be many opportunities coming her way in the near future. By Chuu and her mom calling out BBC, this will set a precedent for future idols to speak out, for idols and other people that work in the K-pop industry to become whistleblowers. And because of Chuu and her mom whistleblowing, BBC suffered its worst nightmare, possibly losing their only K-pop group while also getting the scorn of the entire K-pop industry.